What is up, everybody? Edgar Jr., Dad Central, having fun as usual with Mr. Drew. Drew, what's going on?
And not much, Ed. Just another busy week trying to plan for March break coming up, trying to plan for the holidays. The normal stuff as a dad, you just go through that. But one thing that's come up for me, and my daughters, they're 10, is they've got classmates who have cell phones. They're in grade 4. And they're on me, Daddy, can I get a phone? Can I get a phone? Can I get a phone? And I just started thinking about this more. And we don't have to go into this. Maybe we'll talk about it with our guests today, but because I'd love to get their perspective.
Sure.
Why do grade 3s and 4s have cell phones? I don't get it. And I didn't. I even got so amped up about it. I wanted to actually put a post on my LinkedIn about this whole situation with kids in grade 3 and 4 having cell phones, but I held myself back, and I figured maybe I'll chat about it today, and maybe we'll talk about it in the future episode or something. But that's what's going on for me. I got a little bit of bee in my bonnet about that.
No, I think that post is going to come sooner rather than later. But you're blessed. I've seen grade 1 students that have cell phones. Okay. Now, before we go any further, let's do our usual when we do this. The Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So no more about cell phones for 2 minutes, okay?
Okay.
I have a feeling it's even going to come up during this conversation today, but that's all good. We're always happy to meet wonderful members of the dad community on the Dad Central Show. And we have 2 gentlemen that are brand new to me. Drew knows them a little bit through email, but we're going to get to know them better. We're going to get to know about their passion about fatherhood better today. So I'm going to turn it to Drew to introduce them to our audience.
Thanks very much, Ed. Well, I'm excited, really. And I would actually love both Adam and Marc to actually come on and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their show and a little bit more about their journey of how they got it. But they are the hosts of Modern Dadhood, which is a great podcast, a great production quality, and just the connection that Adam and Marc have and their banter back and forth leaves me smiling as I listen to their show. So I'm excited to have them on our show and get to experience them firsthand. So welcome, Adam and Marc. Thanks so much for being here.
You get. There we go.
Thanks so much for having us, guys.
What's going on? How's the day?
It's Friday. We're recording on a Friday, and I feel good about that.
Yeah, I'm in a quiet house, which doesn't happen often. So I'm living it up right now. Very, nice. Very content.
You're living it up with us? Wouldn't you rather be living it up with somebody else, maybe?
Absolutely not.
No. Just so long as my kids are not here running amok, I'm having a good time, so I'm excited about this conversation.
Good stuff. Go ahead.
Marc, how many kids do you have? How old are they? And maybe Adam, how many kids do you have? How old are they? Just so we get a sense of, how important the quiet house is for you at this stage. Because I can understand that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go. I have 2 kids. They are 5 years old. I have twins, and they're both boys. So it's the volume level can be quite high for most of the time that they're here. Yeah.
And I have 2 daughters who are 9 and 6, and the energy is high much of the time, but as we talk about on our podcast, emotions are high a lot of the time too. And as much as we like to try to talk with them about their emotions and let them feel how they feel and validate that it's all right to feel however you feel, it can be really exhausting dealing with high emotion, all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate a little bit to both of you. I've got twin daughters who are 10, and I've got a son who's 7. And so I remember him at 5. And even now, as he's getting to 7, the energy level. So you take that times 2. I can understand the energy. And then the emotions at this two of them at 10 is interesting. I also have a little added layer. We're blending a family. So I've got now a 12-year-old daughter and then a new baby coming to the mix. So peace and quiet. I'm enjoying it now. But soon enough, we won't be in there. But, the fatherhood journey is something that, I think we share as probably something we're both passionate about. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about each of your fatherhood journeys, and whoever wants to start, just that process of becoming a dad and what that was like for you.
Mark, you want me to take that first?
I'm pointing at you.
Sure. So my wife and I have been, I'm 40 years old, just turned 40. My wife and I have been married for 13 years. And like I said, our oldest daughter just turned 9 years old. I am the youngest of 4, and so all my siblings are between 16 and 20 years older than me, which meant that when I was in high school and college, I had young nieces and nephews. And it was important to me in my early 20s having those kids in my family to be a part of their lives and to get to know them and spend a lot of time with them when I was young. And having done that, including, more than once, staying with my niece and nephew for an extended period of time, allowing their parents to go on like little vacations without kids, it just sort of cemented the fact that, I absolutely want to be a dad. And so my wife and I had been, married for a number of years. We did a little bit of traveling. We, did the things that you do before you have kids. And then we just decided, now there's no reason to wait any longer. And it's just as you all know, it's once you're on that train, it's an adventure.
Once you're on that train and it's suddenly out of control, there's nothing you can do, but so it's funny. Adam and I have a lot of similarities. Like, I'm also the youngest of 4. I'm 41 and my siblings are also a fair amount older than me. So I had a lot of nieces and nephews around when I was growing up, but I didn't really think about like fatherhood when I was younger. My wife and I, we've been married for 15 years and we were married for quite a while before we brought kids into the picture. We used to live in New York City. We used to live in New Jersey, and we commuted into New York City. And we once in a while we would have the conversation of, what about kids? And it seemed, excuse me, in that circumstance, the living that sort of typical kind of rat race, it didn't seem possible. It just didn't, like, how do you fit kids into this picture? It just didn't seem possible. And so our conversations were usually pretty short about it. But one thing led to another. We moved to New Hampshire, and that life sort of, the pace kind of slowed down, and it just suddenly became, we're having kids. Let's have kids. And it was almost like the flip of a switch, really, when I look back on it now. We ended up having to go through IVF to conceive. So the journey took a sharp turn once we started, and took us down a path we didn't necessarily expect to go down. But I tend to do big decisions in my life, kind of just by this, flying by the seat of my pants. Like, we're going to have kids. And then we started that journey, and now it's been 5 years, and it's hard to remember. It's hard to remember what happened yesterday.
Cool. I want to ask, did both of you meet before you were fathers or after you were fathers?
We met before. You said, Mark, 2014 is when
I think it was 2014 when we moved here. It was 2014, so we must have met around.
It would have been just before my oldest daughter was born. And we found that I always liked running into Mark, in social environments. I felt like we always kind of hit it off. And then I had kids for several years before he and his wife had their kids. But it's like, once two people have kids, and I'm sure it's this way for you both too, that it sort of starts to dominate the conversations that you have. And so running into Marc was less about, what are you watching on TV or what's going on at work? And it was like, what kind of craziness is happening with your family right now? And so when I had the idea for the podcast, thought it was going to be fatherhood themed. I had approached Marc because he is an art director and has graphic design experience. And I asked him, would you be willing to help me with some graphics, a visual identity for this podcast? And as soon as I started sharing with him the theme and kind of the format and the approach that I wanted to take with the podcast, he expressed a lot of interest in it. So it quickly went from, this is my passion project, can you help me with some artwork for it too? Let's try this together and see how it feels.
Cool. I got another question, Marc. The whole IVF journey to becoming a dad. We haven't been blessed to have a father on our journey, on our show yet. Sharing about that. Whatever you can comfortably, we'd love to have you share that with our audience, especially from a dad's lens.
Yeah, sure. Let me just think about how not to turn this into an epically long ramble. Yeah, I mean, it was something I had a little bit of knowledge about before we found out that we needed to go down that path, because my brother also and his wife went through IVF to have their kids. So I knew like a little bit, I wasn't exactly taking notes when he was talking about it, but I was a little familiar with the process. And so, it was a little bit odd to sort of kind of be in this setting, in a doctor's office, in this sort of environment, the picturesque version of like you and your significant other maybe having kids, it doesn't always conjure like a doctor's office and like really blunt conversations, and having to talk about extremely personal things with doctors and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, like that was where we were. We found ourselves having these conversations, and that was our reality. It just became our reality, and it wasn't necessarily something that was, that I think either of us really looked at like, oh, what a bummer. It was more like, oh, okay, this is how we have to do it. So let's try this and see if this works. We had to go through 2 rounds. So if you don't, the long and short of it is, that there's medication that the woman has to take to sort of boost, hormones and boost egg production and so on and so forth. And that's for a cycle. And then there's a period of time where through different methods, there's a variety of different methods. You can take an egg and you take a sperm and you put them together in a little petri dish, and then you watch them grow for a little bit. And then if there's some positive things happening, you can insert them back into the woman's uterus. Yeah. And the process can last a while. The one round is, it's think of it like a year essentially. Yep. And our first round didn't take. It just didn't take. We went through the process and we waited for the results, and it just didn't take. So again, reality. That was the reality. So we said, okay, well, what do we do now? And the doctor said, well, you can do another round. We had a little bit of a window because my wife, when we were going through this, she's a few years older than me. And in the eyes of the doctors in this realm, in this world that we're talking about, this world of IVF, she was considered geriatric, because she was over 40, right? So not a super great thing to hear when you don't feel or look or are, geriatric really. But again, this was our reality. So when faced with, should we do it again? The answer was kind of clear to us. Do we want to have kids? Yes. So let's go through this again. And we were lucky that it took the second time. I know some folks do it. Yeah. I know some folks go through it and they go through it and they go through it and it just doesn't ever take, and their journey goes someplace else. So we were fortunate, at the very end, to end up with two wild and crazy boys.
Thanks for the share, Drew.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Marc. And congratulations to you and your wife. I'm really glad
to
hear that that's made it. It's resulted in where you're at right now and for your family. So one of the things that came up for me is you were both sharing about, well, actually, I think it was Adam who was sharing about the show and how it got started, is just the idea of, having other dads around when you're becoming a dad or as a dad. And so not so much about the show, but can you talk a little bit about your friendship and how your friendship has supported, or what it's been like to have a close friend who's going through fatherhood at the same time?
It's a great question.
It is a really good question. I mean, so I realize it's not all that common for men to get together and talk about, the difficult parts of being a dad, or even to admit that they're going through something difficult. It's not, it sort of goes against the idea of this long idea of like stoicism. It may not be masculine, but I don't know. I think Marc and I probably are both maybe just more kind of vulnerable personalities anyway. So for us, you get together and you talk about how much you love your kids, or how much they're making you absolutely crazy, or just what's going on with them. And, the idea of getting together however often, once a week, and sharing stories and commiserating and celebrating the great stuff, it just came very naturally to us. And I mean, I think we found, as the person, who is primarily booking our guests on the podcast, I found that a lot of the people we approach, even, people with very notable names, are interested in talking about this. It's something that they are proud of, that they love talking about, but they don't get asked about it a lot. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to be able to come on and talk about what you love about your role as a dad, when really your career might be whatever, an actor, or literally anything. And so for us, we've used the podcast as a way to learn from the experiences of other dads whose lives are, very different from our own, and we gain new perspective. And the hope is that the listener, sort of benefits from that as well.
I'll say just anecdotally, like, I remember the first time Adam called me up after my kids were born. And I'm sure you probably both remember this, right? You have kids, and then you're in this weird little bubble for a little while at home. And then you finally go back out in the world, and you're sort of bombarded with, whatever it is, if you're going back to work, what's it like, and, then there's like the seasoned parents that are kind of looking at you like, oh, and it's nice, when people express, but there's so much of what I feel like sort of happens is pretty surface level. And, several months after, Adam called me up and was like, do you want to grab lunch? I was like, yeah, sure. And we sat down. We were at a place in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, burger place. And Adam started asking me like real honest questions and really wanted to know how I was doing.
I didn't really want, I was just trying to be nice. I was trying to make you feel good, man. But
I mean, look, to be honest, I was there for the tater tots.
Yeah. I heard they had really good tots. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, do you want to meet for lunch? I said, where? He said, this place. And I said, they've got great tater tots. Like, yeah, I'm there, man. But it was, like, that was the first time to me that had happened, and I realized during the course of that conversation, like, he gets it. He knows what I'm going through. He's been through it because his kids are older. He's been a dad longer than me. I stand to gain, some insight here, and it's just cathartic, to have like a real honest to God conversation, with somebody who understands. And, later on, whatever the time frame was that Adam came up with the idea for this show and called me and said, hey, can you do some artwork for this show? It just, like, when he started talking about it to me, I was like, of course this needs to be a thing. Like, it was immediately clear to me, like, how important this thing could be, like how important the topic is. And just knowing Adam, and knowing that the conversations that he and I have had in the past, like, if other people could have those conversations, it could do some real good for people, and I mean, not to sound too like grandiose about it, but good for the world, that more dads are talking for real with each other and listening to each other, and actually having real connections around the idea of being a parent and having children. A lot of positive things could come from that.
And from what I, know of Dad Central, you guys share a sort of a similar mission to that. And I think that's something to be celebrated too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really appreciate that. I think very well said from both of you. One of the things that I think Dad Central was started on way back when, before we even, had the show or anything like that, was, the research that validates when you have a positively involved father, the difference it makes for a child in terms of all of their measures of success are just so greatly improved when you have a positively involved father. And so there's a lot, I think, that comes against fathers. There's a lot of barriers, a lot of limitations, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of different things. And so, Marc, when you're talking about, that real honest, like, he asked you these questions like he cared. I know it's just about the tater tots. It was just a great place for that.
We've established really what the goal was.
That's what it was. Make sure you go to a place that's got great tater tots. That's the key.
Time it's ever been mentioned on our show.
Yeah, that's right. So, but it's very important because that, I'm going to guess, somehow helped you a little bit in your fatherhood journey. Even if nothing else, one of the things we know, dads feel isolated a lot. Right? I'm alone. I got nobody else is kind of going through what I'm going through, and you kind of find your own way through, which sometimes could be negative, sometimes neutral, sometimes it's harder to find a way through positively. But anyways, maybe could either of you talk about like, what did it, I guess, mean for you when you saw yourself as a father, knowing that you had somebody else that could relate to you better than if you were just all by yourself?
It's a good question. It's the only reason why I'm quiet, because I'm just thinking about it.
I know. I'm trying to just embrace the silence. I feel like so much of the time we, just try to inject ourselves, but it's nice to take a second and actually reflect on that.
Yeah.
My background is in video production. So directing, editing, creating videos. And so for the last 20 years, I've been interviewing people, on across so many different industries, so many different topics. And the thing that I've always enjoyed about it is I get a chance to learn about things that I otherwise wouldn't really have any business learning about. And I get to go places that I wouldn't otherwise get to. So this podcast has sort of been an extension of that a little bit. Like, the theme is a little bit more defined. The parameters are a little bit more defined, but I get to speak with somebody who's very different from me, yet we still have this thing in common. And so there's so much to talk about and so much to learn from. I'm not sure if it really answered your question. It's comforting to know that anybody who's a parent, a dad, a mom, doesn't matter. If you have kids, you share an experience, and there's subject matter to talk about. There's commonalities. And to me, that's very comforting. But I think it's just a matter of encouraging dads, however we're able to be open to discuss this stuff, because not only is it going to make you feel better, it's going to make you a better parent. It's going to make you closer with your kids. It's going to shape your kids into more well-rounded people as they grow. So there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, every time we have a conversation, just Adam and I as friends, or anytime we have a discussion on the show or an interview, when we're interviewing somebody, or even just conversations like this, it's just, every time it's just comforting to know that it's just comforting to know that other dads are out there thinking about this stuff, having similar experiences. Also maybe sometimes feeling like a total failure, and also sometimes feeling like, man, are my kids the only kids on the planet that are this X, you know what I mean? Like this crazy, this terrible, this weird, whatever it might be, because I certainly didn't know, leading up to becoming a dad and then like coming home from the hospital and having those first really difficult few months when you have these infants, or in my case, infants at home, how kind of isolating it feels, I wasn't really prepared for that. And I don't really remember anyone sort of preparing me for that. There's a lot of preparation for, got to know how to change a diaper, got to know how to burp a baby, got to know how to put them to sleep, all that kind of stuff. And of course, there's a battery of things that we're concerned about for the woman carrying the child, giving birth to the child. That experience can really be traumatic. My wife had a cesarean section, like whatever they call it, but her incision was vertical. So severing her abdominal muscles, right? She needed quite a decent amount of recovery time, so a lot of thought went into that. Not so much in the, hey dude, you're going to feel wicked isolated, and being in the midst of that, it kind of sometimes just hits you, you sort of look around and you're like, I'm not even sure what time it is right now. I'm pretty sure it's the middle of the night, and then you have these thoughts and you have these feelings, but then it's all of a sudden it's feeding time, or it's time to, get back to work or whatever it is. And it's hard to take or find the opportunity to sort of digest and like process some of that stuff. And I guess I'm telling you, it wasn't until months later when I started having conversations with people like Adam, where I started to really recognize like what guys go through, what men, parents, dads specifically sort of go through, and kind of the general lack of support. There's plenty of really good resources. This show is a great resource. I hope our show is a good resource. There's great Facebook groups, but if you don't know that they're there, then you don't know. And you could go on feeling isolated. So I think the conversations are just important,
Yeah. Very well said again. So thanks so much for, offering just that experience, that these are, comforting, Adam, and, breaking some of that isolation, Mark. It's really important. So, Ed, do you want to hop in?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to celebrate your friendship first and foremost, because I don't know if the majority of dads out there have what you have. So I know you appreciate it and you treasure it, but I want to celebrate it. It's really good for not only each one of you as dads, but as men, but also your families. So I'm sure you're being great examples. I know you're flawed sometimes, but we're human. That you're setting great examples for not only your families, but for other fathers. But I have a question for both of you. What impact, if any, have your parents had on your fatherhood journey?
Great question. We actually talk about that a lot on the show, just how you're shaped by your parents for, most of us for all of our childhood. I don't know, Mark, I feel like you usually have some good thoughts around this, and I usually kind of hang back and because I'm not sure that I've really figured out how to talk about it yet.
Yeah. I mean, I will always preface anything I say by stating that I had great parents. My mom's still alive. My dad passed several years ago. But I had great models in them. My dad was, I think, really fell into sort of like the typical, like if you picture a dad from, like I said, I'm 41, my parents were born in 1943. I grew up in the 80s, 90s. and, very quiet, didn't really get into things very much, not a whole lot of the affection or emotional communicating around emotions or anything like that. Not a lot at all, just in the household in general. And I look back at that now and I see it as a thing that I didn't have that I know that I want my kids to have. Right. So maybe it was kind of a negative thing for me looking back, but it's a positive thing now because I know that I needed it, and I know that people need it, and I know that my kids need it, and they're going to get it, but there was also just a lot of positive things, about my parents that I think about all the time. And I guess daily, honestly, daily, like as Adam said, it's like, we talk about this a lot. Like you're all of a sudden, when you become a parent, it's like, you've got some of the things that the books that you've read and the movies that you've seen and the friends that you've talked to, but then you have your own upbringing experience. And just so much of that comes to the surface in these little instances throughout the days, and so I'm constantly reminded of me being younger and having an interaction with my parents, and then trying to sift, in like an instant, trying to sift through that and then apply something to what's happening with my kids in the moment. And it rarely works out well, but there's it's an interesting sort of dichotomy, I think, that exists. You have all these lessons that you bring with you. You have all these things that you hold in your mind. That's the picture of what it means to be a dad. If you were lucky enough to have a father growing up in the household, you have that image in your mind, both positive and negative pieces of it. And then you have your own self view, in the world that you're growing up in. And you have to somehow figure out a way to kind of balance those things and apply them to everyday situations. And when you said a few minutes ago, people are flawed, like, man, do I feel flawed?
Not all the
Here's a question though, Marc, because my upbringing that doesn't sound like it was that different from yours. My parents were wonderful. I felt loved. I felt safe, cared for, but it wasn't like touchy feely. Let's talk about why you're feeling this way, and let's work through this stuff. But I know that you and I'm not sure about you guys, Drew and Ed, but like Marc and I know would both, if any of our kids are experiencing like really big feelings, not to say that we wouldn't, respond in a big way too, or have like big feelings in the moment, but like both of us would sit our kids down and say like, hey, I recognize that like you're really upset about this. Like, let's talk about it. Let's, and if they want to work through it, that's great. And if not, you give them space to have their feelings or whatever. But like, I guess my question is, and maybe it's more of a question for you, Marc, like if you and I didn't grow up in an environment like that, how did you and I both become parents who like take on that parenting style? And I would open the question to you too, Drew and Ed.
Man, that's a great
question. Where do
too.
we learn that from? Nobody taught it to us.
I think sometimes we become what we lack or we don't get. So I can speak for I was the same sort of thing going with my dad. He didn't sit me down. It was like, you do. If you're upset about something, you just got to basically live with it. So I realized when growing up, I said, you know what, because of the lack of that, I need to turn that around because I don't want to continue that journey through me. I hope that makes some sense.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and I think it really relates to what Marc was saying, in that, when you have that your experience and you recognize that, you know what, I want something different. Again, not that it's negative, but in my personal situation, my father loved me absolutely, but there was a whole lot of trauma that was part of that childhood experience.
Mhm.
And as I grew and I became more mature, and then I started to think about becoming a father myself, I recognized that part of my experience I don't want. So what do I do differently, and how can I create that? So again, it's just there were, for me, I always felt a void when it came to those aspects of the relationship that I always wanted, but I never felt that I could have. And for me, a big part of that is like a connection. Like you feel connected to this person. And so presence is like, having a dad there is one thing, but there could be a father there, but not a connection. And that's for me what I was like, I craved the connection. Yeah. And that's what I said, well, I want to make sure that my children have that for me. That's just, again, my story.
I just want to go a little bit, add on that, because I was carrying on some of that, for lack of a word, hurt for many years. And it was a number of years ago, I said to myself, you know what? I need to talk to my dad about this. And it took a lot of strength, internal strength, to present that to him, because I didn't know how he would react. But when I presented that to him, he said to me, son, I knew no other way to raise you. That's the way I was raised. Beautiful.
Wow.
That was a big turn. So for any dads like that out there, if you have that opportunity to have that conversation with your dad or whoever raised you, I'd encourage you to have it. You may not know how it's going to turn out, but at least you'll get it out, because if it's sticking inside of you for a long period of time, not only is it affecting you, it could also affect your parenting. So I just want to leave that and just add that on.
That's powerful. That was that. Just hearing him say that and acknowledge that, was that a really healing process for you?
Absolutely. It was a big U-turn. Even though it was many years past, it was still there. And I realized myself that if I'm going to change going forward, I need to address it. And it doesn't always come out good, but I think for me, I said I had to do it because it just was too much inside of me. I didn't want to be screaming and nothing was coming out.
Wow.
Well, Adam and Marc, one of the things that I heard you say on one of your recent shows was really that your mission was like learning about experiences that are different than yours, or different than your own. And I think that I loved that mission because there's so many other perspectives, so many different ideas. And for me, as someone who's really into personal development, it struck me as someone has humility, but also a desire to grow and improve. And that to me was really powerful to hear you share that. But I also wonder if, looking at all the shows you've done, are there any common themes that have come up? Any commonalities while everyone's had different experiences, different backgrounds, all sorts? What are the things that you found that's common to dads?
Here's a common theme. I don't know if this is a rabbit hole that we want to go down, but here's a common theme. Every dad that we've talked to, I think, or close to it, has expressed concern about technology, just moving forward technology in general. Your kids' access. I mean, whether they're a toddler, who's going to eventually be exposed to the internet and social media and whatever technology looks like in another 10 or 15 years, or whether they're college students, thinking about privacy issues. So many, and sort of coupled with that is just this idea of our dependence on technology and all the sort of bigger ramifications of how it is, impacting young people's ability to focus and pay attention and learn, and know what news is trustworthy and what is not, what's real and what's fake. That's a theme that has come up a lot of times, and it's a theme that I don't think we've ever spent an entire episode addressing.
No. And it's interesting, Adam, that you brought that up, because I was just thinking about our interview with Jordan Shapiro, who is among other things, he's an author, and he's a PhD, and he explores the topic of fatherhood, manhood, gender, several other things. And he wrote a book I still have his website open. I can tell you the exact name of the book, The New Childhood, Raising Kids to Thrive in a Connected World. And I'll fully admit, I haven't read the book yet, but his other book that I read, Father Figure, was hugely impactful to me. And so that's a book that's always been on my radar to check out. And I kind of, once in a while, I come back to like, we should have him back on the show.
We should,
because he obviously has a point of view and a perspective on it that I know that I could stand to gain from, because I have the same questions that a lot of these dads do around the use of, when you give a kid a cell phone, when do they have their own account on this whatever website, and just the pace at which these things evolve is like unbelievably fast. I mean, think about when I was a kid, and the changeover from NES to Super Nintendo and then to Sega or whatever, these were like eons of time that happened, before these things changed over. And now stuff just evolves and it gets more and more complex by the day, it seems. And so it's definitely a fear that I have, like, when am I going to start to not to be able to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
The only other the other theme that I feel like comes up a lot in the show is this idea that none of us are experts in this. I mean, maybe yes, some of us, not Mark or myself, are PhDs, right? But like none of us really know what we're doing, right? Maybe some have more experience than others, but we're figuring this out as we go, and that's okay. It's a good thing. And just the fact that we're talking about it and aware of it and trying our best to be present, goes a long way. And so, nobody's going to be a perfect parent. You're going to constantly fail, and you're going to learn from your mistakes, and you're going to correct them. But just having a general awareness of presence and doing what's right for your kids is important and good.
Did you like that theme? I think is really important. One of the things that I wanted to achieve as a dad, I felt if I'm going to be successful anywhere in life, I need to be successful as a dad. And when I started to, I had twins, which was, first 2 years, fantastic. Then kind of toddlers hit. And then we had a newborn. And it's kind of like all hell broke loose. And it was hard, really hard. And so I saw myself failing a lot. And in doing things, I'm like, I don't want this to be the atmosphere in the home. And so can you just a thought from you guys in terms of, does that common theme that comes across, which almost like normalizes the fact that we're all human and then we'll make mistakes, but we're still on this journey trying to get better every day. Does that help you, or did that help you at all? Or do you, what are your thoughts on that?
It helps me a ton. Because I think it's really easy to get, speaking just from personal experience, I think it's really easy to get to sort of turn inward and convince yourself, I just don't have what it takes, or for me, sometimes that imposter syndrome sort of creeps in. Like, here I am on a podcast about dadhood, talking about being a dad and this, that, and the other. And my morning was terrible with the kids. And I sent them off to school, and I drive away going, well, I'm the worst, so hearing other dads, parents in general, it almost sounds a little bit like, there's that term like Schadenfreude, which is like you get pleasure out of someone else's misfortune. But there really is something, like when I hear other people struggle, other dads struggle, especially dads that I might look at and go, that guy's got his stuff together. I feel a little bit better. Not because they're struggling, but because I'm not the only one. And and in this connected world where we're sort of all collectively putting the best version of ourselves out there for the world to see in the form of TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, if you still use Facebook, we're putting the best version of ourselves out there. And there's often this sort of facade that a lot of people see, and you see it so much that you just start to convince yourself that that is really true. And so you see these these tiger moms, who pack the entire week's lunch, in the most beautiful looking thing you've ever seen in your whole life, and that's like, oh, another mark against me. It happens so often. So I think it's really important to just be reminded, get hit with reality. And I think that's like our conversations. We try to make them real. We try to make them authentic. This is really how we feel. Sometimes we feel great. Sometimes we feel confident. Sometimes it's the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that made any sense.
It was a good word salad that you've just tossed up.
I'm so good
I enjoyed
at
it.
making word salad.
I like that.
I have no idea.
Word salad.
I'm a chef. I'm a chef.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's called modern dadhood. You do it all.
There you go.
Absolutely.
You know what? Guys, it's been a real treat. I don't want to let that technology comment go away because I opened the show with it. I'm going to throw. So thank you very much for saying that. Here's my simple thought. Yes, the technology is going to rapidly change. Yes, we may even fall behind in it. But my thought is that when we have healthy limits, when we have connected, strong relationships with our children, and we educate them and let them know that the reason that we might have limits is to protect them, and we build a connection with them, they're much more likely and willing to follow our guidance and direction and protect themselves, because our passion is to protect them, than if we don't do that. And so I think that's just my comment on it. I'm not an expert, not a PhD, but I do have 3, well, actually soon to be 5. No, I've got 4 now, counting the and then a 5th on the way. So there's lots of limits in our home, and they certainly battle against them. But I tell you what, those limits aren't changing. Yeah. Anyway, that's my comment. But I just want to say thank you so much, Adam and Marc. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love connecting with other dads, other men who are, just passionate about being a father and being the best they can. 2 words that really stood out is like your humility, but your passion for growth as dads and men. So I'm really honored to have you on the show. So thank you. Ed, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, again, I want to celebrate both of you and what you have done, are doing, and will be doing. What keeps you going?
Oh, the money. We're making tons of money from our podcast, guys. Yeah, no, absolutely the cash. False. Just to be clear. That was a joke.
Couldn't be more false. I'm in for the tater tots, if we're being honest.
I think the next show is recorded at that pub where we're getting tater tots.
Yeah. Live podcast.
That's right.
Okay.
We're doing things in person these days.
You guys, if you guys ever make your way to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, okay, look us up. We'll all
absolutely
go live version of the show.
I think the serious answer is just there's so many topics to cover, and so there's never a shortage of interesting things to talk about and learn about. And like I said before, in some kind of selfish way, our podcast has gained enough. We've got enough episodes, we've gained enough credibility that it becomes easier to book get guests, any sort of influential guest that we want to have on. We spoke to an astronaut at one point. It was somebody I never thought in a million years I'd have a chance to talk to about fatherhood. We were talking to dads of all ages and backgrounds and different parts of the world, and that's just sort of the motivation that keeps me going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of the notion that you're never done learning and growing, right? It's a lifelong thing, and this show gives me the opportunity to constantly be growing and learning, and it's from these conversations, from these different perspectives, and I just feel really fortunate to be even able to just have the opportunity, and the platform to do that.
Well, everyone, you can catch all things Modern Dadhood at moderndadhood.com. All the great things they do, all the shows they have, that's the home base, and everything grows from there. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time in your personal schedules and your professional schedules to reach out to our audience today. If there's anything we can help you or any of the dads or families that you serve, please reach out and please keep in touch with us.
Appreciate it.
Drew,
Appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one,
My
guys.
pleasure,
And enjoy the quiet household for the rest of the day, by the way.
I'm gonna. You see that guitar back there? I have a date with that guitar right back there for the rest of the day.
All right, man. Take care, guys.
Thanks you.
All right. Take care. Okay. Modern Dadhood. Good stuff. Drew.
You know, it was funny because at a certain point in time, it's like it was their show. They took it over and were asking the questions and engaging. And I just had a lot of fun with that conversation. And, you know, I do really love their mission. And they want to bring diverse perspectives, diverse ideas, and that are different than their own, with the intent of learning and growing. I just love that approach. I think it's so powerful, so important. And I love their banter back and forth, their relationship, and just it's a real fun show for me to listen to. So I'm looking forward to listening to a lot more.
Yeah, I the whole relationship bit, and dads do better together than on alone.
We drop the mic after that. Dads do better together. Nothing else. Nothing else to say. All right. See you, everybody. Yeah. We're out.
No, they do better together. And I'm speaking that anyone who listens to this episode, they realize that and they see that it can be done together. So don't believe the hype. It can be done together. So as we check out today, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Again, Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man. And because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. As always, we'd love to hear from you. So please email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. Questions, comments, etc., guest suggestions. We'd love to hear them all. Don't forget to check out our website. There is a pile of resources and more stuff to come on the website. So please keep attention. And again, that was a podcast website, by the way. Listen, and then the Dad Central website, where there is billions and billions of resources on there, growing all the time. So as always, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And as always, remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll see you soon. Take care.